Hello, hello. Can anybody hear me? Thank you, Joshua. How are the audio and or the music and voice levels? Awesome. Welcome in, everybody. Jittery Jet says hello from Australia. Hello to you from America. And Happy New Year. Voice audio just then sounded low. How about this? Is this any better? Moved a little closer to the mic. Awesome. Well, I think that's enough preamble. I think we'll go ahead and get going here. So I'm gonna. Hopefully, you all will bear with me with my first ever attempt at a live stream and flying a mission live. So hopefully, it'll be pretty fun. So yeah, what I've got for you is the vessel that I'm going to be flying this mission in, and I wanted to take a moment here at the start to take a look at it, since we're not going to be able to see most of it or any of it for a lot of the flight. As far as Duna missions go, it's pretty straightforward. We've just got our lander up here. I've designed it so it has two cupolas that are opposing each other. We'll most of the time just be looking out of this one, but then we'll use the downward facing one for the landing and some of the docking that we're going to do. But then, yeah, the rest of this is just our transfer stage. We've got a heat shield for when we get back to Kerbin. But yeah, this is our main orbiter. Got some nuclear engines. It's actually has way more delta V than it needs, but as I designed this mission, I realized I didn't need quite as much, and I didn't want to have to redesign the whole launch. So we're going to be carrying more delta V than we need. But otherwise, the rest of this is a pretty standard launch vehicle, I guess. It's kind of big, since we're going to need to launch like straight up and straight out of the Kerbin system to make all this happen. But otherwise, that's what we're going to be working with. So I think without further ado, we'll go ahead and kick things off here. So I'm actually going to leave. First, I guess I'll show off our launch window here. Launching on year 1, day 220. So this is in Kerbin days, not Earth days like I usually do. And this is our phase between us, between Kerbin and Duna. So we're basically going to be launching. We're going to be launching at minus 15 degrees ejection angle. So kind of we're going to launch and pretty much go straight this way. And I've timed the launch and injection, so it'll cut off, and we should have a nice Duna injection that kind of takes us there, like this. The return part of the mission is going to be way more complicated, and I will get to that in due time. But that's the basic setup for the launch. And we basically just want to launch the first instance on this day where the ejection angle reaches minus 15. So I'm going to load it up here. We've got Jeb and Bill with us. So I'll hit C to enter the cockpit, and this is where we'll be for the rest of the flight. So first thing I'm going to do is actually open up the 2 cal controllers that we're going to need for this. I only need these for the launch and injection. Okay, voice is better, but I need to back up a little bit. There. Is that a better distance? Let me know. So we're going to get things set up here, and the first thing I'm going to look at. Okay, I actually waited a little too long, so we're past minus 15. So I need to actually go back to that quick save. Let's go back here, and then we'll redeploy it. Jeb and Bill. Okay, we'll get our action groups up. Or our cal controllers, I should say. And we'll enter this IVA view. And then we'll go over to this advanced orbital info tab. And so you see here our ejection angle, it's minus 14.4, 0.5. We're just going to time accelerate forward until it gets closer to 15. There we go. Then we're going to enable SAS and then launch right when it reaches minus 15. Now. All right, we are off and going. How loud are the engines? Is that good? Okay. Yeah, might need to turn the music down. Turn the desktop audio down just a hair. All right. So we're off and going. There's really nothing we'll be able to see initially, since we're inside the fairing here. But we are off and going on the first stage, and so this is going to burn for about another minute longer, and then it will it'll separate the first stage, push it away with some Sepatrons, and then it'll get going with the second stage, which will burn for a little over 2 minutes. Right. goes the first stage. And there goes the second stage. So at this point we should actually be in space, but I have to have it wait for the second stage to burn out before we before it deploys the fairing, because otherwise it will actually run into the fairing, and that'll knock us off course a little bit. But otherwise, we're just going straight up and straight out. These first two launch stages are going to give us a nice kick, and then we're going to ride the nuclear engines for about 6 minutes to set up our injection all the way to Duna. So, yeah, can't really see anything right now. I could switch view to the rear-facing pod, but that's actually not quite safe to do now, because the SAS autopilot is still using the vector engines to correct our attitude. So if you switch to the back-facing pod, it will start slewing the engines in the wrong way. So we've got to wait a little bit for that. Let's see. If I click on the window here, you can see I've mounted the RCS sort of close in, so we'll be able to see that firing throughout. Let's see. And yeah, once it cuts off the second stage and then starts the third stage, it's going to deploy some solar panels, which we won't be able to see until we're later at Duna. But yeah, the entire launch and injection is completely automated, just to make it nice and consistent. And yeah, the rest of the mission from here will be flown manually. Alright, so there goes the fairing and the second stage, and now we are going to be riding these 4 nuclear engines the rest of the way. Okay, so now that we're on the nuclear engines, I can hit V to switch to the rear-facing cupola, and here you can see all we can see out of the window here is just the heat shield that we'll use on the return. But we can also see some of a couple of fuel tanks and Kerbin receding in the distance there. So yeah, not much for Bill to look at this point. But one thing I'll note about the front-facing cupola, if you look closely, I've mounted some flags on the front window here. If I turn some lights on, you can actually see them. Here, let me zoom all the way in. There you go. You can see those. I've mounted some flags, and that forms a nice pair of crosshairs to help us keep track of where the very center of the window is. Will come in handy later when we're doing the return back to Kerbin. So as this burn continues here, let's see, I can get rid of this. Talk about some of the challenges that are inherent to this. Of course, flying the entire thing in IVA means we can't use the map mode, so we won't be able to set maneuver nodes. But it also means that we won't be able to set any celestial objects as a target. If you can, we will be able to set other vessels as a target, and that'll come in handy when we do the rendezvous later. But we won't be able to set other celestial bodies as a target. So that complicates the outbound and return journeys, those interplanetary flights. Since we'll be making a lot of use of the orbital info in the bottom left, but that only ever applies just to the whatever current orbit you're on, whatever celestial body you're currently within the sphere of influence. So we're limited in terms of the information that we'll have available when we're flying interplanetary. But I think I've worked out a consistent flight plan that'll help us conduct this mission without needing any of that. Thank you very much, Jasper Jones. It's very kind of you to say. I spent a lot of years watching a lot of YouTubers do a lot of very, very, very impressive stuff with this game, starting with Scott Manley and obviously I've seen a Strats and Blitz video or two, and he's done some incredible stuff. Brad Wistance, huge inspiration. Hodiak, not sure how to pronounce their name. Also impressive stuff. So yeah, it's fun to be able to contribute to this KSP community. And will this be edited into a full vid? I don't know yet. This is mostly just a test of doing a YouTube live stream, doing something a little different. I originally considered just doing this as a straight up video from the get-go, but I really didn't feel like going through all the hours and hours and days of editing and doing the voiceover and everything. I just wanted to do something a little more spontaneous. So we'll see how this goes. Yes, I'm flying to Duna without the IVA mods. I'm just using the IVA, the stock IVA information and capability. So yeah, that gives us navball and SAS, just the stability SAS, and then action groups, and what we can see out the window. That's really it. Okay. We're coming up on about a minute left in this injection. And that is when things are really going to start to get interesting. Hopefully. All right, about 10 more seconds. Okay. So that should be the injection done. First thing I'm going to do here is I can close this out. I'm going to hit X to kill our throttle. Yes, that is, the crosshair is made out of flags, and there's some lights shining on them. So we'll use that for help us track what we're looking at later. So yeah, next thing we're going to do is we're going to roll until we're oriented more or less facing with the same perspective we'd have in the map mode, because it makes things easy to keep track of where we're going. Yes, this is hard mode times 9,999. I'm sure you could do harder somehow. Maybe do the whole mission with no heads-up display either. May have to try that at some point. But for now, just doing it in IVA mode. So I've rotated myself so that we're facing, so that the north is up, just to make it a little more convenient for us. And from here, we're going to just time accelerate until we get to Duna. It's pretty much a straight shot. So first, I'm going to get us to the Kerbin SOI boundary, which happens there. Okay, so yeah, we can tell we're on our solar orbit by looking at the orbit info. And now, if I switch to universal time, I want to time warp until we get to around year 1, day 300. Because that is when we are first going to be able to see Duna out the window. And if you've never tried this, you may be surprised to see just how much zooming power the Kerbal IVA mode has. So if I zoom in here, it is right, let me see if I can put my cursor there. It's right here. Maybe too small to see. It's only a couple pixels, but if I keep it moving, let's see. And there it is. See that? So I'm going to continue to time accelerate in. And there it is. So let me pan over here a little bit. So I'm just going to try to slowly approach it here. Okay, you should be able to see Duna and Ike now. And basically, we're waiting until the moment we get into Duna's sphere of influence. And we're going to look at our perigee. I've designed this so that it should give us a Duna flyby perigee of around 25,000 kilometers. But in testing, it's come out around anywhere between 15 to like 40. So we'll see what we get. But as long as it's within Duna's sphere of influence, it should be good for our purposes. So yeah, there it is. I'll time accelerate in a little more here. And we want to do this this pretty distant flyby because we need to approach Duna in a way that ensures we don't encounter Ike. And that is a difficult thing to do in the absence of the map mode, as you can probably imagine. So it's gotten near our to the edge of our sphere of our field of view here. So I'm going to actually slew the vehicle to the left here, just so we can keep it in view. Guess I can use RCS. We have plenty of RCS. There we go. Okay. So now if I continue to step along here, eventually we'll see the time accelerate. Oh, there it is. And yeah, there we go. Okay. So this has ended up being a pretty distant flyby. See down here, we're coming in 42,000 kilometers. So we're about 2 hours from perigee. So we just want to make our way in here till we're about 5 minutes from perigee. Okay. And now I'm gonna turn off SAS. Yeah, turn it off. And then we're going to yaw to the left until we are facing our retrograde vector. Any reason for using RCS? Just to make it quicker. And because we have plenty of RCS. I don't want all of the this lose to take forever. So yeah, so we're lined up there. I will throttle back up, and then we will hit Action Group 1 to reactivate the nuclear rockets. And yeah, so now we are doing our capture, and this will take a while, but we can physical time accelerate. Yeah, to help speed this up. And yeah, it is fairly big, Martin J, or Marty J. Yeah, we're pretty much full of fuel right now, and we have a couple of big liquid fuel tanks. So the slews are going to be a little painful starting off, but it'll get a little better as we burn off some of that fuel. So for this maneuver, we basically need to kill almost all of our orbital velocity since we're capturing so far away from Duna. And what we're going to do is capture onto an orbit that has a periapsis at about 5,000 kilometers. And so that's just outside of the, sort of just beyond the orbit of Ike. And then we'll coast down to that perigee and circularize at that 5,000 kilometer altitude. And we're going to do that so that we can ensure that we are at a safe phase with respect to Ike before doing another Hohmann transfer, which will take us down towards Duna. But for now, another lengthy burn. Any other questions about the design or mission profile so far? What kind of mission? We're doing a Duna mission in IVA mode only. So we're just going to be looking out the window here for the entire landing and return back to Kerbin. I think that when I first started playing this game, long time ago, I'm pretty sure Duna was like the first planet I ever did a landing on and return from, and I feel like forever and ever I just like stopped going back there because I figured out how to go to the more difficult destinations like Eve and Tylo and others. But with this with this challenge, it's forced me to go back to I guess what I'd consider one of the easy planets and do a mission that turned out to be pretty hard. So it's already got me planning for maybe trying my hand at like a IVA only Joule 5 perhaps, as much as a pain as that would be. Okay, so we're starting to slow ourselves down here, and I think I'll exit physical time acceleration. Yes, we are indeed going to be landing on Duna and returning to orbit and rendezvousing before going back to Kerbin. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so we're now on a captured orbit. Lowering our apoapsis down. And then eventually we're going to go circular. And then the periapsis is going to start to go down. And we want to stop that when it gets to about 5,000 kilometers. So, there. Let me just burn a little more. Doesn't need to be exact. Okay. Yeah. Do I have an idea of where I want to land? Yes, just somewhere along that's on the equator. Yeah, we won't be doing a direct descent. We are going to be doing a rendezvous before we go back. Thank you, Hunt M2. Appreciate it. So yeah, so now that we have our perigee down at 5,000 kilometers, we can just coast our way down there. It's going to take 30 days, but what I'll do is time accelerate a little bit here, and once we get in close, we'll be able to see Duna and Ike as we come down. And there they are. So we are going to have a little bit of inclination to correct. And we'll do that on this in this high parking orbit before going past Ike. So here we're coming down, and we're almost at periapsis. And once we're there, I'm going to turn 180 degrees around, and then we'll lower our orbit down once again. So there we go. So now let's turn ourselves around. Okay. So there's Duna and Ike over there. All right. So let's align ourselves up here. And now let's lower the apogee. So we're going to lower this down until we get into a pretty close to circular orbit. But the main thing we actually want to do is go over to the advanced orbit info. We want to line up the argument of perigee with our, I should say, we want to make the argument of perigee 0. Because that means we will know that we're at the line of nodes when we're at perigee. So I'm actually, I think I burned actually a little too much. I'm going to turn myself back around. And the nice thing about being in a nearly circular orbit is that it's very easy to manipulate the argument of perigee. Just by burning radial in and out, you can easily move it around. And since the orbit info doesn't give us an indicator of when we're at the line of nodes, we won't know when we're there unless we line it up with the line connecting the apogee and perigee. So I'll line myself back up, prograde, and then I'm going to burn just until I get the argument of perigee to 0. And almost there. There we go. Hunt M2, I'm not allowed to use the map at all. Or at least I'm going to try not to. I may hit the M key accidentally. We'll see. But yeah, try and do the whole thing without the map mode. So we have the argument of perigee at 0. So that means when we reach periapsis, we'll be at the ascending node. And you can see we currently have an inclination of 6.5. So we're going to be at the periapsis in about 49 minutes. So what I need to do is pitch ourselves down so that we are facing the south. Whoops, I burned the wrong way. Okay. Right. So we'll go over here. Line ourselves up like that. Okay. And now we can time accelerate to the periapsis. Okay, 2 minutes, 1 minute. There we go. Okay. So now we are at periapsis, and we know that we're also at the line of nodes, and so now if we burn, we should see the inclination drop to 0, and the argument of perigee will flip around like that. Oh, I burned too far. All right, let's turn ourselves around. Yeah, there were definitely a bunch of times during the design, during the testing phase, where I realized I should have just put a pair of, like a set of engines facing forward and one facing backward that I could just switch between rather than having to do this, but here we are. So we'll line ourselves north. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to burn to get our inclination back to... There we go. Inclination 0. So there we go. So we got ourselves oriented properly. So we fixed our inclination, but we're still in this high parking orbit. So we're going to have to do a Hohmann transfer down, back down down to Duna, low Duna orbit. So in order to make sure we're doing that safely, we need to check on the phase of Ike. So to do that, I'm going to align myself back in our sort of neutral attitude here, and then we'll pivot until we are looking at Duna. Okay. So now, Ike is about 150 or so degrees behind us. And in testing, I determined that the unsafe region for attempting a Hohmann transfer is when Ike is behind us by about 60 to 120 degrees. So currently Ike is in a safe place for us to safely Hohmann transfer down to low Duna orbit, I think. So in order to be sure of that, all we need to do is time accelerate until Ike is directly in between us and Duna. And we'll know for sure that we're in a safe position to land, or to do the next transfer. So let me just pivot around here a little bit so we can get a better view of things. Okay. So now I'm going to time accelerate forward here So we'll see Ike moving along. So like right now, it's definitely not in a safe place for us to home and transfer. If we were to do that, we would definitely encounter it. So we'll move it along a little further. Okay. And we'll keep going until... Okay, gotta go a little further. Alright, we'll come around here. Okay. And we'll keep going. And alright, so now you should see there. So if we put it basically right in front of it, we know that we're definitely in a safe place to do our transfer. So now let's point ourselves retrograde again. And then we will start burning. And this time, we're aiming for about 130 to 140 kilometers for this next perigee. So we're going to bring the perigee down. You see it coming down. And we'll cut it off a couple seconds here. There. So we're ultimately aiming for a parking orbit around 142 kilometers. But I'm going to aim just below that initially. Now we know that the next burn we're going to have to do in the opposite direction, so I'm going to go ahead and slew around that way preemptively. Yeah, maybe instead of doing an IVA only Joule 5, I should do an IVA only real solar system flight to Mars. That would be something. Okay, so we're lined up the other way. And now we can coast down to Duna. It's going to take about a day. And then when we get there, we will circularize into our low Duna orbit. Two hours, 1 hour, and we should see Duna coming up on the side here. There it is. So we'll coast down here to our perigee, and then yeah, we'll kick off the engines again. And we're going to get our apoapsis to about 142, between 142 and 143. That's what we're looking for. I'll just time accelerate here a little bit. I don't want these burns to take absolutely forever. Doesn't make for very compelling broadcast here. All right. Okay, sorry about my mic peaking. Is it better if I move a little further away? How's that sound? Okay. Keep lowering here till we reach about 142. We need to get into a fairly specific parking orbit because it'll make the rendezvous easier later on. So put the apoapsis at 142.5. Using the RCS to do a little trim here. All right. Okay. So we've got our apoapsis set right, and now we will just time accelerate till we get to there, and then finish circularizing. And once that is done, we will basically be ready to start the landing, which will be fun. Okay. So we're almost at apogee. Okay. So we'll pivot ourselves around this way. And once we get there, see, I'll do some small burns here just to raise the apogee the rest of the way, or raise the perigee, I should say. Get it up to 142.5. Or pretty close to it. Okay. So that's pretty close. All right. Let's see, we're headed towards our perigee, so we can raise it by burning radially out. And okay, there we go. That's close enough. So, yeah, we are now in low Duna orbit, and we're pretty much ready to go here. We've picked up a little bit of inclination, but anything under 1 degree will be fine. So, what I'll do is rotate ourselves around till we are facing the sun. And then we're gonna time accelerate through the through the night side of Duna before separating to start the landing. So we'll come around this way. Okay, there's the sun. Okay, so there, facing the sun. And now we will time accelerate around until just after the sun comes back out. So here we are going into Duna night. And okay, here we go. So when the sun comes up, we'll get ready for our landing here. So first thing I want to do is shut off the lights, and then we're going to switch our view to the rear-facing pod. And then we're going to detach ourselves from the orbiter. And I have an action group for that, which is action group 2. Okay, and then we'll just back away from the orbiter. Okay, and we'll be able to get our first look at it here. First look at the orbiter. So there it is, and we can see our landing gear and some of the fuel tanks here. I'll go ahead and get the landing gear out. And we're pretty much just going to wait until we are a safe distance away from the orbiter. So we'll move ourselves away. Yeah, here's the landing. It's what everybody's been waiting for. So I think that's a pretty safe distance now. So now we can pivot ourselves around so that we're facing retrograde. Oh, come on. There we go. Looks like prograde here since we're using the rear-facing pod. If I switch to the front-facing one. Yep. There's our orbiter drifting away. And we'll just have to wait a few more seconds to make sure we're clear of it. I think that's pretty good. So let me switch over here. And then we will do action group 3. That will start up the landing engines. Okay. And now we'll do a small burn here just to start us moving away a little bit. And in a couple seconds, we will see the orbiter drift by. So there it is. And what we need to do is wait until we see the vessel label come up. Then we can set this thing as a target, because we will very much need it to be set as target in order to catch up with it later. So there it is. There we go. Okay, so we got it set as target. And now we will continue burning until there. Okay, got our periapsis down to -50. Should see the orbiter disappear here in a few seconds. There it goes. So, yeah, we are off and going now. So, what I'll do here is slew ourselves down this way. So we're looking at Duna. And then I'm going to roll so that we're facing east. Like that. And there we go. Okay, so we are about ready for the landing here. I'll switch to surface mode. Too much weight with 2 landing pods. No, actually, the cupolas I actually found to be not that bad for making this landing happen. It's yeah, we're carrying just enough fuel to make this landing and rendezvous happen, and really no more. So should be all right, unless I don't screw it up. So we can time accelerate in here. And once we hit the atmosphere, Okay, so now we're going in the atmosphere. I'm going to press action group 4. That's going to deploy our Duna parachutes. Hope I land someplace flat. I did not put very much thought into where exactly we were landing. I was more concerned with the solar illumination angle than the actual topography. But I did test this out with landing on like a 30-degree slope, and it stayed upright. So I think we'll be okay. Hopefully. Down here. Once our surface velocity reaches about 700 meters per second, we'll turn the engines back on. Slow us down a little bit before the chutes open. Okay, let's turn them on. And we should see the chutes open up here in a second. There they are. All right. Perfect. Okay, so we'll let the thing pitch over. Okay, we're coming down here. All right. And then once we're about vertical, I'm going to rotate ourselves so we are pointing west instead. And there, you can see our shadow. Just trying to line things up here. There we go. All right. There's a shadow. And yeah, hard part's over. We basically just need to guide this thing down, and then we'll turn the engines back on just for the touchdown. Oh, and we get that fun texture glitch. Does anyone know how to make KSP not do this? I would love to know. But here we go. We're coming down. I'm going to time accelerate a little bit just to speed this up. All right, getting really close now. Turn the engines back on here in just a minute. It is a bit like Apollo 11 with the shadow. That's a good point. And there we go. Okay. Whew. All right. Yeah, did not fall over. We're on a, what, like 12-degree slope, maybe? No, that's more than 20. Yeah. All right. Okay, but we are safe. All right. Let's take a look from up top. Yep. We are down on Duna with no map mode. No maneuver nodes, no nothing. And soon we'll have to make our way back home here. So, I was debating whether I actually wanted to get out at this point, because technically that would require exiting IVA mode. So if I want to actually do this whole thing in IVA mode, I kind of need to stay in the cockpit. Yeah, plus there's not a whole lot to do if we were to get out, so I think I'll stay true to the challenge and have Jeb and Bill stay in the cockpits for now. At least for this mission. Make this truly an IVA only mission. So, yeah, so now that we're down, we can start planning our return. And you can see based on the nav ball, we can track the position of the orbiter and find when the next flyover is going to happen. And what we're going to aim to do is take off when the orbiter reaches a specific angle above the horizon. So first I'm going to switch to the top pod here. And we'll time accelerate forward. Until we see the target marker reach the horizon. So there it is. And then what we're going to do is lift off right when the target marker reaches about 15 degrees above the horizon. And we're just going to burn straight up and straight out. So there, it's getting closer. Okay. And when we take off, we want to point ourselves directly vertical. So just a few seconds more here. Okay, and yeah, so let's go. Okay, there we go. Turn to the rear-facing pod. And we can watch our ascent here. Just fix my attitude a little bit. Okay. So we are off and going. What we're going to look for is once our apoapsis starts to get close to 140, we're going to start getting encounter information, or approach information, I should say. And we're basically just going to keep burning straight out until we get a decently close encounter with the orbiter. So it's a pretty brute force method of rendezvous here, but it's what works. I do not use a joystick. I have a joystick that I've used in the past, but currently I just use the keyboard. Okay, apoapsis is getting up there. So we should start seeing approach info. There it is. And we're going to cut off when our intersect reaches something small. There we go. Okay, let me burn a little more. 2 kilometers. 1.5. 1.3. Okay. Yeah, about 1.4 kilometers. So not too bad. So we're pretty much hurtling straight towards the orbiter at about 800 meters per second here. Look down. Yeah, so we're on the way up. So at this point, I will switch to the rear-facing cupola. And then we're going to orient ourselves facing towards the orbiter. This is another nice aspect of using this rear-facing cupola, is that I can do the what should I say, rendezvous maneuvers while actually facing the vehicle we're headed towards. So I'm going to rotate around like this. And then we're going to orient the nav ball like that. And we're going to reach our intersect in about 2 minutes. Initially, I'm going to burn just to move the intersect a little bit closer. Like this. Oh, actually, maybe not like that. Well, maybe that's the wrong direction too. Darn it. Okay, well, I'm just going to wait till I get closer. It's easier to just wait until we get decently close, and then we'll just basically kill all our velocity. But yeah, you can see it there. Coming in towards it. We're coming in pretty fast, but we have a pretty high TWR, so killing our velocity is not that hard. So we're going to start once we're about a little less than a minute from reaching it. Okay. Okay, so that killed about half of our velocity. Pivot this way. Okay. Pivot over here. So yeah, now we're going to get in real close. Just make sure I'm lined up here. There we go. So there's our super speedy rendezvous without the map mode. It's just a matter of launching right when the orbiter is at the right spot. Okay. So there we go. So we've matched velocities with it. You can see it over there. First thing I'm going to do is ditch the landing engines, since those are actually in the way of our docking ports. So I can do that with action group 5. So we'll do that, and then I'll burn away from them a little bit. So there they go. And now we'll focus our attention back on the orbiter here. There we go. So I'm going to fly the rest of the rendezvous still using the rear-facing cupola, because that's the one that carries those docking ports that we're going to use. There's 4 of them around the edges, rather than one in the middle, so that we can actually use the window. So now I will start burning in towards the vehicle, or towards the orbiter. We'll start picking up some speed here. And part of the reason we pointed the whole thing towards the sun before leaving was just to ensure that the docking interface is nice and lit up when we get back to it here. Since I knew I wouldn't be able to switch to the orbiter to adjust its attitude or anything. So yeah, from here it's just a matter of using our RCS to move ourselves in closer. Let's see. Still have quite a bit of daylight left. Don't want to have to be attempting this rendezvous in the dark, for sure. There is nobody on the orbiter, correct. Our 2 Kerbinauts, Jeb and Bill, are just on board this vessel, and there's nobody on the orbiter. So wanted to bring everybody to the surface. So now we're coasting by it here. I will kill our velocity a little bit. There we go. Alright, so now we're in position to dock here. So let me get oriented just right, and then we'll move in. Probably should have put one of those sets of flags in this rear-facing cupola as well. Would have made this docking a little easier. But overall, it's not too bad. Alright. Let's line this up here. Yeah. Then we actually want to disable that as a target, because otherwise it actually messes up the orbit info, or the velocity display, if you dock while having it set as a target. So we'll slow down here, and basically we just need to aim straight for the middle, and then the magnets will take over. Almost. Yeah, fortunately the docking doesn't have to be super precise. We just, yep, there we go. Okay. So we are now docked. So now it's time to prepare for the return journey, which is actually where most of the challenge of this of this challenge lies. So first thing I need to do is actually correct the inclination down to 0. We need to be in a very, very specific orbit to do this injection to make sure we're lined up right. So first thing I'm going to do is see whether we're headed towards apogee or perigee. We're headed towards apogee. I'm going to orient the vehicle so it's facing radially in. Like that. Then we're going to burn until, like before, we line up the argument of perigee with either 0 or 180. So you can see it's actually slowing down the motion of it, so I need to flip around the other way and burn out. Like, line ourselves up there. And yeah, so we'll burn a little bit here until we see there. Yeah, now so you can see it's really moving. So now I will line the argument of perigee up with set it to about 180. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. There we go. So argument of perigee is 180. Which means that our periapsis is lined up with the descending node. So once we reach our perigee, we want to burn to the north. So I will reorient ourselves that way. I keep overshooting all these slews. That's all right. We got plenty of RCS to work with. There we go. Now we'll time accelerate till we get to periapsis. And then we will nullify our inclination. Then we're going to have to do another eccentricity correction to make sure we're nice and lined up. Okay. Okay, so we're almost at perigee. So now we will burn until we see the inclination hit 0. Oh, wait. Am I pointing in the wrong direction? I am, aren't I? Oh, yeah. That's because I didn't switch which pod I was in. Gotta be in the forward-facing one. Yeah. Whoops. Okay, so let's flip around. Like this. There we go. Okay, now if we burn, it should lower the inclination. Yeah, there it goes. 6, 5.4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Okay. 0.1, that's close enough to what we need. And let's see, our apogee perigee is 142.4 by 142.2. So I'm going to actually burn to increase those a little bit to get them up to 142.5. So let me do that. Okay. Alright, so we'll burn a little bit here. Just a little bit. Whoops. Get the apoapsis to 142.5. Like that. And then we will time accelerate till we get there. Okay. And then we'll face our perigee and do this final circularization. All right. So now let's raise that up. Let's see, almost there. There we go. Okay. So that puts us in our Duna parking orbit that we will depart from Duna. So first thing we need to do is time accelerate to year 3, day 100. So we are going to be sitting in Duna orbit here for a little while to get our Kerbin phase into a better place. So while this whips around, you can see Duna and Ike occasionally here. So we'll keep going, and then once we get to that departure day, we're going to do a fairly coarse maneuver to start our journey back to Kerbin. But then we're going to do a series of small correction burns to put ourselves in a place where we'll be able to encounter Kerbin later. And we're going to use, I think, sort of a neat trick to figure out to do that. So you'll see that here in just a minute. For now, I need to continue moving forward here with the time acceleration. We're nearing the end of year 2. And that's coming up. And yeah, once we get ready to depart from Duna, we'll need to make sure we leave. Or I'm essentially aiming for a specific day where I know that Ike is not going to be in the way when we do this injection here. So I know that it's not in the way starting at like the start of day 100, year 3, day 100. So we're almost there. 94, 95, 96, 97. You see Ike wiggling its way across there. So day 100 should be coming up on the next orbit. You notice part of the reason I chose this exact orbit was because I knew that the orbital period would be approximately 1 hour, which made it easy to know when certain things were going to happen. Okay. So let's pivot ourselves around this way. And what we're going to do is do a burn at a particular attitude with respect to Duna, and we're going to start the burn when we reach a specific ejection angle. In this case, we're aiming to start it when the ejection angle reaches -40. So we're currently at about +40. So I want to align ourselves with the equator. this. All right. I'm going to time accelerate forward a little here, a little bit. Okay, we're at about -3. And when we do this burn, we will want the our nav ball to be, we essentially want to be pitched down by about 5 degrees from the horizon. So we'll need to make sure that that's lined up when we reach the ejection of -40. So let's move along a little further here. -20. -30. Okay. Now I'm going to slew back over to the direction we need. Okay. We're getting close to the time. We're at -34. This is, other than the launch and ejection, this is like the only other super critical burn in the mission. The rest we are pretty leisurely. -36. -37. Okay, it's almost time here. -39. We want to make sure we're right at -5 degrees. And go. Okay. So our injection burn is off and going. And to know when to stop the burn, we're going to use the eccentricity. I'm aiming to cut off this burn when the eccentricity reaches about 1.625. That's just a value it's kind of a random value I just picked out during testing, which should give us a nice initial return trajectory towards Kerbin. We don't know exactly where Kerbin is right now, and it's currently too small to be seen out the window. But we're going to do several maneuvers that are going to put us in a good place to not only see it, but encounter it later on. And for some reason, the velocity display here is messed up once again. But we won't actually need that. So that's not a huge deal. But I guess we can take one last look at Duna here as we make our way home. There's Ike creeping up. Okay, eccentricity is up to 1.15, 1.2. 1.3, and like I said, we'll cut it off around 1.625. .5. 0.625. There we go. Cut it off just in time. I'll actually retro burn a little bit. Okay, there we go. So yes, we are on our way out of the Duna system. So let me pivot myself around. We can watch it recede into the distance. Okay, and there we go. So now let's time accelerate along here and wave goodbye to Duna and Ike as we make our way out. And there they go. So let's keep time accelerating here until we exit the Duna system. Alright, so we're now back on a solar trajectory. And from here, to make our way back to Kerbin, we're first going to lower ourselves into a circular solar parking orbit that has an altitude of like right at 14 million kilometers. And so you can see our periapsis is currently just above that. So we're going to orient ourselves retrograde, which we actually need to go the other way. So we'll flip ourselves around like this. Okay, and now it's just going to be a small burn to lower the perigee or periapsis down to 14 million kilometers. Just like this. All right. Try and get that as close to 14 as we can here. Like that. Okay. And now we will time accelerate down to that periapsis. It's going to take about 200 days. And this, this 14 million kilometer periapsis is just outside. It's just beyond the orbit of Kerbin, just beyond the radius of Kerbin's sphere of influence. So, on this orbit, we won't actually encounter Kerbin at all, but we're going to use it in order to correct our phase angle between us and Kerbin in order to prepare for the final correction maneuver. And so we're going to get down here towards periapsis. And we're going to start by just circularizing the orbit. So 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. Okay. So now we'll pivot around, so we're pointing retrograde again. And when we are lined up here again, we will start burning again. So earlier when we were leaving Duna, we had to leave in a way that was avoiding Ike. Now we're setting up an orbit so that we can properly set our phase with respect to Kerbin, and then we'll do a maneuver that will let us encounter Kerbin. Now, once we reach the Kerbin encounter, we'll have to do another maneuver to ensure that we miss the moon in particular. Running into Minmus is really not an issue because its sphere of influence is so tiny that you really have to try in order to hit it. But the same can't be said for the moon. So we will need to do some specific maneuvers in order to ensure that we miss the moon on the way down. But for now, I just need to circularize this heliocentric orbit. That takes just a little bit of time. I suppose I can time accelerate a little bit. And just like when we were in orbit around Duna, we're going to have to fix our inclination with respect to Kerbin. Now that might come as a bit of a surprise because you can see that the inclination is already, it's only like 0.1 degrees. But we need to do a lot better than that. We need to get it like really close to zero. Like really close to zero. Because we're going to use a Kerbin transit of the sun in order to dictate when to perform the next major course correction. And to do that, we need to be in as low inclination of an orbit as we can possibly manage here. So let me keep reducing the apogee. Basically, I'm going to stop burning once we see the argument of perigee hit either 0 or 180. Okay, eccentricity is starting to get pretty low. And eventually, once we get it near 0, we're going to see the argument of perigee flip around. Let's see. Okay, now it's starting to go. So we'll continue to burn here. Yeah, we're nearly there. So at 130, 140, 150. Oh, 180. Just past it. So let me retro burn with the RCS here to get it to 180. There we go. So now we're in a nearly circular orbit with an argument of perigee of 180. We are currently headed towards our perigee, which means once we get there, we will be at the descending node, and we will want to burn to the north in order to correct our inclination. So let me do that. So it's basically the same logic we followed while we were correcting our Duna inclination, but this time about the sun. So orient to the north, like that. And then now we will time accelerate about 180 days. So it is by no means a direct return flight. In fact, it's quite non-direct, but it's consistent and pretty straightforward to execute. And I preferred that over something quicker, but that was more error-prone. So 40 days, 30 days, 20 days. Okay. So once we reach our perigee here, we will burn to the north. Okay. So I'm going to burn to the north, and we're basically going to use, when we see the argument of perigee rotate by 90 degrees, to tell us when to stop. Because unfortunately on the orbit display we only get a tenth of a degree of precision. So I'll just burn a little bit here, and eventually we'll see this go to 0, but we'll know it's not exactly 0. Okay, now it's showing 0. Argument of perigee still around 180. We're gonna cut our engines when it moves. Oop, yeah, there it goes. So you see how it just jumped really quick, and the longitude of ascending node moves. That means we just passed 0. So let me retro burn a little bit here. We actually want to move it to about 270. If we can get it there. So if we can get it to 270, then yeah, there we go. So that means we know that we have to go about a quarter of the way through the orbit in order to get back to the line of nodes again. Because once again, the inclination is still not quite as close to 0 as we need it. Can't tell from just looking at the numbers here, but it's we need to get it even closer. So with the argument of perigee at 270, let's see, we're currently headed towards the apogee. This orbit is that the, let's see here, when we're 112 days from apogee, that means we should be at the ascending node if the argument of perigee is 270. Pretty sure I have that right. Yeah. Okay. Pretty sure that's right. So what we'll do is time accelerate forward here until we are about 112 days from apogee. Because that's about halfway between apogee and perigee. And then once we are there, we can do this final inclination correction. Should be able to do it just using the RCS, because we're in the stage where it's going to be a very, very precise, very, very sensitive maneuver here. Okay, so we're now halfway between apogee and perigee, and now we'll burn until we see the argument of perigee flip once again. There it is. See that? It doesn't take much to get it to rotate, but there we go. And once it's at this point where just barely touching the RCS inputs gets it to move, that basically tells us we've got the inclination as close to 0 as we're going to get it. And that means we are now in position to actually find Kerbin. So this is sort of a tricky part of the mission here. What we'll want to do is pitch down so that we're lined up with the equator, or with the ecliptic once again. All right. And we want to get very close to the ecliptic. like that. And then we want to orient ourselves facing north-south, like this. And then we're going to rotate around until we can see the sun. Now, I know at this point, because of the time that we left, because of when we left Duna to head towards Kerbin, I knew that we're going to be in a pretty decent point in our solar orbit for Kerbin to start catching up on us pretty quickly. And so that means if I am oriented properly, I should be able to look to the left of the sun, and then eventually we'll be able to see Kerbin if I'm looking just right here. So at this point, see, we're in year 4, day 264. I know that just from testing this that Kerbin doesn't start to get to a point where we can easily see it until around the start of year 5. So let me pitch over this way a little bit, and then we're going to time accelerate along. And let that move forward. And then every once in a while I need to rotate so that we can keep the sun in view. So let me do that. Okay. Now we'll time accelerate forward again. Until we reach about, until we're past day, until we're into year 500. Or into year 5, I should say. Because at that point, Kerbin should have closed in enough for us to start seeing it here. So let's pivot ourselves this way. And we're going to put Kerbin sort of on the right side of the window here. Like that. Then we want to make sure we're lined up with the ecliptic, like this. And now, if we focus on the front window here, if I look towards the left side of the window and zoom in here, if we scan to the right, there it is. See that? Little dot there. Got just a couple pixels. In fact, on my screen I can see both Kerbin and the moon. But there they are. And so what we're going to do now is sort of keep track of where Kerbin is in our field of view, and we're going to time accelerate along until Kerbin moves. Oh, where did it go? There it is. Yeah, we're going to time accelerate along until Kerbin gets in between us and the sun, and then once Kerbin reaches solar transit, we'll know that it's in the right phase angle for us to do the last major mid-course correction. Yes, just a black pixel at this point, but we'll get it into view here shortly. So what I'm going to do is try to keep our eyes on it. And pivot around. Like this. There. So now if I time accelerate along here, you can actually should be able to see it start moving. So there it is. And there it goes. So if we time accelerate long here, just need to make sure I don't lose sight of it. So there it goes. And as we approach on it, it's gonna get bigger. And as we continue forward here, eventually the apparent motion of Kerbin is going to stop moving to the left, and it's going to start moving to the right. And that's when we know we're getting close to the transit that we're looking for. This is indeed pushing stock KSP to its limits, and that is what this channel is mostly for. So let's keep going here. Yeah. Alright, starting to reach the edge of our field of view here. Okay. Yeah, we're getting nice and close here, so you should be able to see it pretty decently now. And it looks like it's actually nearly going to reach its turnaround point. Well, maybe not quite yet. All right, so let me rotate the vehicle around. Just got to make sure I keep track of where it is. All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so we're getting in nice and close. You can see the moon there, and as we get even closer, you can start to make out Minmus as well. Currently it appears as just one little pixel for me. And I think we're approaching the turnaround point. Let me just... Yeah, here we go. Yeah, here it is. So yeah, so now Kerbin is going to appear to sort of stop, and then it's going to move back to the right. And yeah, then we're going to see our transit. And the sun's over there. So yeah, we're getting very close. So I'll time accelerate along a little further here. And yeah, I think we got the inclination like just right. Because we should see Kerbin run into the disk of the sun right in the middle, hopefully. And one of the little tricks I'll use here is that normally if you're just looking at the sun, there's all the glare there. But if you place the sun near the edge of the screen, you could as long as you put the center of the sun off the screen, you can block out that glare, and it'll make it easy to see when the transit happens. So that's coming up shortly. Let's see. So yeah, so there's Minmus right there. Just a couple of pixels down there. Yeah, definitely not going to attempt this mission in real time. That would be pretty bonkers. Especially since this is taking 5 years. But here we go. Alright, see that? Coming in nice and close. Let's see. Oh yeah, you might be able to see Minmus there. Minmus is about to transit the sun. But what we're looking for is when Kerbin reaches the transit. So we'll move in a little closer. Almost there. Alright, and then once Kerbin reaches the transit, we're going to wait until Kerbin is completely within the sun's disk, and then we'll start the next maneuver. A little further. Okay, about there. Yeah, so now Kerbin is right inside the sun's disk, and that's our cue to start this burn here. So, oh, come on, camera. Okay, there we go. So now we will rotate so that we are pointed retrograde. And at this point, all we need to do is lower our perigee to around 12.97. So we'll burn. Yeah, I don't know if visual mods would render this impossible. I guess it depends on which visual mods you're meaning, because the ones that do like distant object visual enhancement might actually make this challenge easier, which is partly why I wanted to do this in a game with stock, not only stock physics but stock visuals. So there we go. Periapsis is now 12.97, and so that's just a value I worked out in testing to basically know that if I lower the orbit to this perigee at this point, at this phase with respect to Kerbin, I will automatically obtain a Kerbin encounter about 3/4 of an orbit later. Which is nice. We basically just had to. All we had to do was use the transit to know that that we were in the right phase with respect to Kerbin, and from there you can just perform a pre-designed maneuver and guarantee you're gonna get an encounter. So let's look in here towards the sun once again. If I block the glare. See, yeah, so you can see Kerbin there still near the edge, but I can time accelerate forward and we'll see it pass through the center of the sun like that. I'll move the sun over to the side, yeah, and there it goes. So now we can just follow Kerbin as it moves its way through the sky. It's gonna go off to the right since we're still in a higher orbit, but it's gonna pretty quickly reach a turnaround point and start coming back the other way. So it's gonna come around this way, and eventually it will stop moving and it'll basically look like it's coming right at us, because it will be coming right at us. Okay, let me reorient the view here. Oh, burn a little far. There we go. Okay. So now we should be in a good position to see the final encounter here. So now we've come around, and we're now looking at sort of more of the lit side of Kerbin. And as it continues to get bigger here, we should see it sort of stop and just sort of come right at us. There it is. It really did sort of give me a unique perspective on the game playing it like this. Because I'd always done, these parts of the mission in the map mode. And so it's sort of a unique, sort of different way to view the game. And yeah, now I really want to try like a IVA only Joule 5. Yeah, ironically, I think the hardest part of doing a challenge like that would be the landings on Bop and Paul. Ironically, the Tylo and the intermoon landings wouldn't be so hard, just because they're all pretty big and they're all easy to find, and they all have like 0 inclination, 0 eccentricity orbits. So getting around to them wouldn't be too hard, but yeah, getting to Bop and Paul would be quite the challenge, just because of how tiny they are, and they have such inclined and eccentric orbits. Alright, we're getting dangerously close to Kerbin here. You may be able to see Minmus decently well now. It's that little speck there. And once we encounter Kerbin, we're going to do a final maneuver here that's going to set up our trajectory into the atmosphere and also avoid the moon, all in one go. So yeah, now we're basically headed straight on towards Kerbin. And eventually, the game is going to slow our time acceleration because we're crossing the SOI boundary. Hunt M2, a few months ago, I definitely would have thought a Joule 5 IVA mission is impossible. But from what I've learned doing this Duna mission, I think it is possible. It's just going to be way harder, and it's going to take a lot longer. Like, I'm aiming to do this mission in one stream. I think I would have to do that one in several streams. But yeah, I mean, most of the techniques I'm using here, I should be able to apply to a Joule 5 mission if I were to attempt that. Yeah, so we're making our final approach here to the Kerbin system. Getting pretty big in the window. We should be hitting the sphere of influence here in a moment. There we go. Okay. So we have our Kerbin encounter. So from here, what I'm going to do is essentially just kill our lateral velocity until we have a trajectory that's going basically straight into Kerbin. So I'm going to rotate this way. And we're going to align with the radial in marker. Come on. There we go. Okay. And we'll know that we've killed all our lateral velocity once our periapsis reaches minus 600, since that is the radius of Kerbin. Oop, almost there. Okay, this part doesn't have to be totally exact, but... So... There we go. Okay. So, at this point, we have... We're going straight down into Kerbin. Now, if we knew that the moon was not going to be in the way, then this would probably work. But we don't know that the moon's not going to be in the way. So what we'll do instead is we're going to do a small little burn to the north. That is going to where we're going to raise our perigee up to about 30 kilometers. So we get a nice grazing re-entry. But also by burning to the north, it'll ensure that we pass over the orbit of the moon far enough away from it that even if it is in between us and Kerbin as we're on the way down, we will be far enough away from it that we won't enter its sphere of influence. So we'll do that. Oh, and of course I burned too far again. So let me flip around. Okay, and then we'll set our perigee to 30. There we go. So, now that we've got that set up, I'm going to rotate myself around a little bit to get into a better position for when we'll separate from the orbiter to do the re-entry and landing. So let's actually, let me rotate so I'm looking at Kerbin. It'll be easier to see where we're going. Okay. So there it is. And now, if I time accelerate in here, I'll be able to see what I mean with the whole missing the moon trick. So let's time accelerate in. There we go. Pushing the wrong button. Okay. So you see as we're moving in, we're moving sort of up. And this is our trajectory taking us up above the moon's orbit. And it looks like in this case, we may not have... Yeah, actually it looks like in this case, had we not done this, we probably would have run directly to the moon. Or we would have entered its sphere of influence and got flung out of the Kerbin system by the looks of it. But we are headed safely over the top of it. Yeah, the IVA is impressively made. And that's kind of what made me want to attempt this. And honestly, I kind of like the fact that it's like not super well like set up for you to use it to fly the whole game, because then you know, makes doing missions like this more difficult, more compelling, I think. So now I'm going to orient myself sort of to the side here, so that when we decouple the orbiter, we can guarantee it's not going to be in a place where it's going to run into us on the way down. So I will switch over to the rear-facing cupola. And then we're going to decouple the our command pod from the orbiter while keeping this heat shield with us. And so we'll do that using action 6. And then we'll burn to pull the heat shield out. There it goes. And once it's safely away, we can rotate around and take one final look at our orbiter before we make our way towards Kerbin. Yes, I did not need the 4,000 meters per second of delta V remaining. When I originally designed this mission, I needed it because I was doing a much more aggressive return, but turned out to not need it, so we just have it as extra. I'll make sure that the Joule 5 mission is done more efficiently. But now that we're drifting away from the orbiter, we're at a safe distance, we can deploy the heat shield. So we'll do action 7. And unfortunately, once we do that, we won't be able to see anything out of the rear-facing cupola. So we'll switch to the front-facing one. And we'll be able to get ready for our re-entry here. So, kiss the orbiter goodbye, and we'll make our way down towards the landing. So we're going to come in over the North Pole here. And yeah, before we hit the atmosphere, just need to make sure we orient ourselves facing retrograde. And pretty soon we'll enter the atmosphere. So looks like we can still see the orbiter there. Oh, I should also activate the Kerbin parachutes. And we should be hitting the atmosphere here pretty soon. Oh, yeah, there we go. Can tell by the music stopping. And yeah, so we'll see that burn up here in a second, maybe. Yep, there it goes. And yeah, so from here we just let the heat shield do its thing, and then let the parachutes do their thing, and then we'll be done. And that will be an entire Duna mission flown in the stock game entirely from IVA mode. Which I don't know if that's been done before. I know that Scott Manley and others have done an IVA only like moon mission before, but I don't know if anyone's done this an interplanetary one. So now I can just time accelerate as we're dropping down into the atmosphere here. And there's our parachutes. Nice. Now once the parachutes open fully, we can detach the heat shield, and then we'll be able to see our final approach and landing. Yeah, I have seen folks do a couple of interplanetary and other type stuff from IVA with with MechJeb and with the other mods that you can use to spruce up the cabins. But yeah, where's the fun in that? I wanted to figure out how to do it in just the stock game. All right, so the parachutes are open. Now we'll switch to the lower pod, and then we can release the heat shield. And there it goes. Looks like we're going to be landing on land somewhere, I think. Yeah. There's some trees over there. So yeah, let me just time accelerate some here. Oops. Yeah, there goes the heat shield. And yeah. Just going only a couple meters per second here. Should be a nice, safe landing. Guess I can vent some of this remaining RCS. Just trying to make sure I don't land on that debris. And here we go. Touchdown. All right. So that is it. That is the IVA only Duna mission. Let's exit IVA mode, and the camera goes crazy since we haven't used it since launch. But yeah, here we are. Landed near this big mountain. So that is that. I thank you all for joining me, for me flying through this challenge. I, as you can imagine, practiced it a bunch of times to make sure I could do it, but it definitely didn't go quite as smooth in several of the tests, so I'm really happy for that. Let's go ahead and plant a flag here. What the heck? Yeah, you're very welcome. I think I might probably post the craft file for this in case anybody wants to give it a go for themselves. I guess you can use the video as an informal guide to walk through it. I think I mentioned at all points some of the critical numbers that I was using and aiming for throughout. Or you can just design your own IVA only mission. In addition to the Joule 5 mission, I might try like an Eve IVA only flight, or geez, maybe at some point I might try a IVA only Grand Tour. It's like the ultimate stock KSP challenge. We'll see. So, yeah, hope you enjoyed. Hope you had a fun time flying the mission with me. And so I had fun with this too. So I think I might try some other live streams at some point. Thinking the next one will probably be that Joule 5 IVA mission, but maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe that's not actually possible and I should try something else, but we'll see. So yeah, thank you for joining me for the stream, and have a great rest of your night and enjoy the new year, everyone.